I will welcome everyone to the, I guess, August now edition of Turf Tuesdays. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Jim Brosnan with the University of Tennessee, and glad to be back on a Turf Tuesday episode. I had a conflict last month and couldn't be here. These are always fun sessions. You know, for me as a weeds guy, I tend to learn more in these sessions maybe than I contribute at times, and today will be no exception to that, given our guest and the subject matter that we will cover. Before we get started, though, I want to go through a little bit of business. I know many of you who participate in our Turf Tuesday sessions regularly do so for pesticide certification credits. We are lucky enough to have credits in multiple states throughout the Southeast region. We have credits from Tennessee as far to Hawaii. So for those of you in Hawaii, good morning, and thanks for joining us live and in person in Hawaii Standard Time. But everything you need for pesticide credits, you have already done. When you registered for today's session in Zoom, you were asked what state you wanted to have your pesticide credits in, and then to input your license number. All of that is captured in Zoom, and then we will use that information that Zoom captures to make rosters for the various states that have awarded us credits. So there is no action needed on your end if you are interested in pesticide credits. You are covered from here forward. Our superintendent friends that are with us at the end of today's session, there'll be continuing education units from the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America. This has nothing to do with pesticide. I will put that code up on the screen, and then it is on golf course superintendents to input that information to their profile on the GCSAA website. Those interested in asking questions during today's session, you will see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please ask your questions there. It's just easier for us to follow questions and answers and kind of thread everything together than if you were to move them forward through a different format, be that chat or raising your hand or anything like that. So please have all your questions in the Q&A box. Just a reminder, today's session is being recorded. We'll post the archived video will go on YouTube, and then the archived audio will go on the Turf Tuesdays podcast channel on Apple Podcasts. I think that covers it for now. What I'd like to do is introduce our guest for this month's session. Our guest is Dr. Jesse Benelli with Envu. Am I saying that right, Dr. Benelli?
Yeah, it is Envu. Yeah, thanks for having me today. You know, just real quick, just not to jump in and just kind of, take this and run with it. One, thank you for putting me on this show. I think being on here in the month of August for those watching the recordings of this is the best time to be on a show like this, because I can talk about anything, because anything and everything is relevant in August in Tennessee.
Yeah, and tell those with us, we've got we've got a pretty good amount of lawn care operators who join us each month. We've got some golf course superintendents who join us each month. We've got industry folks. I know I've received a few emails registration wise. Some colleagues from New Zealand are with us right now. We'll have colleagues from Australia. Tell a little bit of the folks. Envu might be a new name for some of those in the turf industry. Just give a little bit of background about maybe Envu, who they are, what they do, and then maybe what you do with them in your role there.
Yeah, sure. So, as many of you who have read the headlines in the news, it was last October that we became officially a new company. A private equity firm called Cinven happened to have some crazy number, something in the billions of cash, and they decided to make Bayer an offer that they couldn't refuse, and we became this new company, kind of spin-off company called Envu, and still the same people and a lot of the same products that you guys are all familiar with. And essentially, what do I do at Envu? I guess you could break it down. I'm in technical services. I'm very much customer facing. What that means is I give a lot of presentations. I'm sure some of you have seen me present. And then some days I just use my phone and I answer two questions, sometimes all day long. A lot of times it's a text message and somebody saying, "Hey, Jesse, what is this? I just texted you a picture. What is it?" And then subsequently, the follow-up question is always the same, is how do I get rid of it? Sometimes I wish we had more time to have a conversation about it, because there's really a third question that I wish we could talk more about, and that is, why is it here? Or why is it here in this amount? Whether we're talking POA control and golf courses, chinch bugs and home lawns, or disease concerns, across the entire green industry.
Well, and you're well trained, right? I mean, as a two-time UT alumnus, you're well trained to handle those questions, or at least we like to think so.
Yeah, and another funny story is, so my background is I got my master's and PhD at the University of Tennessee, and it was December 2016. And a lot of the times in graduate school, when you finish up, life comes at you kind of quick. There's a lot of things that tend to happen in a very short amount of time. And I remember, just for me specifically, I got my first son was born, named Hudson. He was born in Knoxville. He was born December 1st. I walked for graduation on December 5th. And then 2 weeks later, took the family up to Chicago, to where I was working at the Chicago District Golf Association, which is kind of a similar position to, say, the USGA. There are some differences. And then from there, I moved up to Canada. I remember at the time it was Will McMurdo. He said, "Hey, Jesse, would you like to join?" At the time it was Bayer. And I said, "Absolutely. I'd love to work for a company like this." And I remember asking, "Okay, where is this going to be located?" He said, "Well, how would you feel about living in Canada?" And so that was a nice new experience for us and the family. I had my second child was born there, and paid a total of $8, which was a parking, paying for parking on the last day. Which, had I known, I could have got a voucher at the front desk to cover that. But I bring up that because if you learn all this information in grad school, and in Tennessee, when I was there, we had a lot of grad students, and we worked quite hard in a lot of different projects. And if you don't actively use a lot of the information that you learn, if you don't use it, you'll tend to lose it. And I remember being in Canada for 3.5 years. I'm dealing with speckled snow mold, gray snow mold, things like that. I was somewhat removed from some of the concerns that everybody has about managing turf in the transition zone. So believe it or not, one of the first things that I did when I moved back to the Southeast, I had about 2 weeks where it was, "Jesse, just stay at your home office, don't travel, just get acclimated to all of this." I pretty much binge watched the Tennessee Turf Tuesdays, and the entire time I was like, "Wait, yeah, I remember now." Brandon was even presenting some of my large patch work, and I was like, "Oh yeah," it brought back some memories of that.
Oh yeah,
Almost like binge watching like a Netflix series. He was like, "Are you still there?" "Yes, next episode." Yeah.
you're the one. You're the one, and we
Yep.
thank you for your viewership here at UT. But no, that's certainly a cool story, Jesse, about kind of the road the industry will take you. And for me, going from Penn State to Hawaii to Tennessee, much of the same, kind of making a Z
Yeah.
across the northern hemisphere. But rather than going down memory lane, I know the folks that are with us are listening and want to get something out of it relevant to them and managing turf this season. Where do we want to start in terms of jumping into it in August? I mean, it's been a really weird year in Knoxville. I know for you in South Carolina, kind of a weird year too. We had lots of extensive winter damage on warm season grass that just threw curveballs galore
Yes.
throughout the spring, and that even continued into the summer. I mean, even look at a day like today where we will push 92, 93 degrees in Knoxville today, and it was 66 this morning at 5:30.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
really just atypical from maybe a cool perspective. I mean, what have you seen as you've kind of gone around and visited with folks?
Yeah, year to date, you nailed it. It was our, I guess, unfriendly reminder that we are indeed in the transition zone. I think that in the last few years, at least, some people got away with doing things a certain way. Things were just so slow on pretty much everything. Bermuda grass lawns, zoysia grass lawns, that cold snap we had in December. Anything that still had any green tissue, some of the zoysias can hang around a little bit longer. They probably got hit. And then that premature grain up in February, that affected a number of different things, disease wise and with some of the warm season aspects of the turf. That in late February, we have temperatures that are conducive for spring green up, and the groundhog saw its shadow, and pokes its head up out of the ground. Things are growing, they're greening up, and then we get hit with those consecutive days in mid-March of sub-freezing temperatures, and that really set things back. And we talk all the time about diseases being opportunistic, and just talk about POA for a second. POA was living its best life in the spring. That Bermuda grass turf, zoysia turf, is just sitting there, and annual bluegrass loved it. So that was a big. People were staring at POA plants probably longer this year than normal.
Yeah, it was a good year to be in the POA control research business. We had plenty of test sites, and I don't envision that changing.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and just to follow up on that, because it's like my favorite topic if anything I work on. I think you're right that the ebbs and flows of being like really warm in spring followed by being really cold, that's going to continue most likely, and I think that doesn't bode well for warm season grasses in this region, the starts and stops of green up. And it begs a lot of questions about the fit of warm season grasses here long term. I look at back to fundamental weed science work and say, well, okay, what's the number one defense against any weed? It's actively growing turf, right? And
Yep.
we not have in the transition zone, if we're managing Bermuda grass or zoysia grass, from arguably October 15th through, in some years, June 1st, but actively growing turf.
Yeah.
Right. So we have a dormant canopy that's just kind of waiting to be invaded. I think there's a case to be made that maybe would be better served with cool season turf, and it wouldn't be perfect. It's not like if we had cool season turf, we'd have no POA plants, because that certainly wouldn't be the case. But it just makes me wonder if we'd be better off with maybe cool season turf in situations where it might not seem the most straightforward.
Yeah, you're right about that. And then just sorry for going down memory lane one last time, but I remember the summer of 2010 and how bad that was, and that's one of those years where a lot of people jumped on board to the warm season train. They didn't want to do or experience that summer again, due to how hot it was. And then 2011 was no picnic either. But look how much things have changed just from a plant protection standpoint. We have, these plant breeders do phenomenal work. For instance, at Rutgers, I believe they're developing some really nice ryegrass that is fairly tolerant to gray leaf spot. Some of these bents that have improved, disease resistance, improved quality in the summer months. The products available have dramatically improved. When we're talking fungicides, we now have 4 safe DMIs now that we didn't have back in 2010. What we know about soil-borne root pathogens has absolutely increased. our knowledge of nematodes, Pythium root rot. We are more equipped now, I think, to handle one of those nasty summers than we've ever been before. But
I,
it makes you think.
I totally agree. I mean, in factoring in, I mean, I think we irrigate turf better now than we did 10 years ago, or at least we aim to. In the golf course industry, moisture meters are pretty ubiquitous amongst golf course superintendents, where I'm not sure that was the case in 2010. Our irrigation system capabilities are more improved, and there's certainly inroads to be made of older facilities infrastructure wise with irrigation making some improvements, and our new faculty member Dr. Bowling I'm sure is going to work on that as part of her program here. But yeah, I mean, it's a different world in 2023 than it was in 2010. We could go down we could go down many roads here, Jesse. We could go down a wheat science road. We could start talking about Saints and Patriots training camp, being that it's August, but
How
that's,
Sean Payton should keep his mouth shut a little bit.
I mean, that probably isn't going to make our friends
Yeah.
at the pesticide regulatory agencies very happy if we segue into training camp. So to get us back on track, I'm going to ask, we had Paul Koch on in June, and we asked Paul a question. And I'm going to ask you the same question. What's your Mount Rushmore of turfgrass diseases?
This is a great question, and I'm going to answer it being specific to the transition zone. If I was in Canada, I would say snow mold. I guess I'm going to start by saying I'm not going to include dollar spot. So that is not going to be on my Mount Rushmore.
I'm about half expecting your advisor to like zoom in here from the side and slap you for that one.
Okay, here it goes. Not to go up on it. I think root diseases are exceptionally more problematic in the transition zone. Dollar spot is not that serious a disease on putting greens, because we're mowing them all the time, we're rolling them on all the time. They get much more consistent fertilizer inputs than say something like fairways or peas. And then the big thing for me is dollar spot rarely sneaks up on you, in part because it's basic plant pathology, signs and symptoms. And I get the whole early season dollar spot inoculum aspect, where the inoculum is building in the spring, and you tend to not see the ramifications until a little bit downstream from there. But in season, the latency period between, say, when dollar spot is active and when you see symptoms is very much shortened. That's symptoms. The signs are when you can actually see that fungal material. Dollar spot lets you know when it's active. When you walk on that turf at 7:30 in the morning, all of that dew is present. Dollar spot is telling you that pathogen is demonstrated it's active. You see that cottony white fluffy aerial mycelium in the morning, so you know when it's active. Some of these root diseases, we don't have that luxury. Say a root disease like Pythium root rot, which is on my Mount Rushmore, you don't really see it when it's active. You can't really lay eyes on the oospore. So long story short, I would say Pythium root rot is on there. I would say take all root rot on bermudagrass. I would say the brown patch gray leaf spot kind of co-infection on tall fescue. And to round it out, I would say, gotta say large patch, just because I did my work on
it. Your advisor would talk about rhizoctonia diseases as a whole, and I've been privy to some heated debates with your colleagues about whether that's even an appropriate thing to do, to group so many diseases as one. I found it interesting. Yep. You had both large patch and brown patch of tall fescue on your tree.
Yes. Yeah. They're so similar. We talk about, Latin names of things. There's, genus and species. Rhizoctonia solani. And then with rhizoctonias, we have this like these AG groupings. And, for brown patch on cool season turf, it's Rhizoctonia solani AG 2-2 3B. In large patches, Rhizoctonia solani 2-2 LP. I mean, they're so close, even to the bitter end. But they are different in unique diseases, just based on host preferences, and then based on when they're most active. And it's a great demonstration tool to show you how, these pathogens have evolved to be opportunistic. Brown patch on tall fescue can grow very, very well at borderline hot temperatures. And that's when the cool season turf isn't at its strongest. And then its counterpart, large patch on warm season turf, it's not active at those super hot temperatures, but it drops down. When temperatures are in low 70s, and the warm season turf is not at its optimal temperature range, that's when the pathogen, that's the opportunity it has.
Yeah, talk a little bit more, Jesse, about brown patch and tall fescue, because I know lots of extension agents join us on Turf Tuesdays every month, and they get lots of questions from homeowners about diseases in their tall fescue yard, and 9 times out of 10 that's a brown patch issue. And you've seen, has this been a big brown patch year, kind of an average brown patch year, maybe low? Or
I would say year to date it's been low, but now is the time to pay close attention on what is actually in that tall fescue. This time of year, really beginning, I'd say the second, third week of July, and pretty much all of August, the difference between a brown patch lesion on tall fescue and a gray leaf spot lesion on tall fescue is very, very hard to do, to be able to tell them apart in the field, because they look so similar. Why is that important? Well, it's important because at one time, a basic application of a strobilurin fungicide, when gray leaf spot just kind of took off on full season turf, it was right around the mid to late 90s when that happened. It didn't get any better than a heritage or an insignia, basic strobilurin fungicide. At least from what I've seen in the Southeast, those chemistries are not nearly as effective as they once were as a standalone treatment. And so if you think you're dealing with primarily brown patch and you spray a strobilurin fungicide, well, if it's brown patch, you're going to continue to get great control. I mean, we've seen just year after year, those QOI fungicides or strobilurins still very effective as a standalone against brown patch. Not so much on gray leaf spot. This is the time of year, if you haven't already and you're in lawn care and you're making your last rounds, if you really want to be covered, you might want to put a DMI fungicide in that mix, or something like thiophanate methyl, which had very strong activity on gray leaf spot. But it's hard to tell. It can confuse me, and yeah, accurate diagnosis is critical, whether we're talking diseases on warm season putting green turf or diseases on tall fescue landscapes.
Well, and I think that that's important too for those who might work with a lawn care company that puts them on a summer disease management program. I mean, an understanding of what the targets are, is important, and something that's templated where it's the same fungicide portfolio year after year over the most typical targets might not always fix the problem. So, I mean, I think that's a good conversation worth having. Anything, QOIs have been the standby on brown patch for a long time, as you noted, and you talked a little bit about a spike with thiophanate methyl, of provide some coverage on gray leaf spot. Yep. Anything new in the brown patch control world, QOI or otherwise?
For brown patch control in home lawns, there's been some really exciting innovations on the golf side. In the lawn care side, things are still pretty basic. It's hard to get things registered into that residential space. That's why we still see some, what some would consider aging chemistries. For instance, one of our products that we would recommend for managing disease on tall fescue would be a product like Armada, which has a strobe and a DMI. But that DMI that's in that material is triademophon, which has been around for a long time, but it's one of those that happens to have the right profile to be okay in the residential space, where some of the other new product launches, for sometimes reasons unknown to me, it just doesn't make the profile to get put in the space. So lawn care fungicides, there actually hasn't been any dramatic innovations for probably since the introduction of the strobies in the mid-90s.
Wow. I mean, and that calls in, I shouldn't say calls in, maybe places even more of a need for optimal agronomics. I mean, we've talked on this Turf Tuesday series for, I think, almost every year. The concept of summer nitrogen applications on tall fescue lawns, that when you and I cut our teeth going through school, it was, oh, you don't want to fertilize tall fescue in the summertime because it'll make it get brown patch, and newer research has proven that that's not really true, right? It probably will help you to have some nitrogen down on tall fescue in the summertime to recover from brown patch symptoms, right?
Absolutely. And for example, when you spray a fungicide on a tall fescue plant that is infected with the brown patch pathogen, it has that brown patch lesion right there on that leaf surface. Just because you spray that fungicide, that lesion isn't going to peel itself off and fall to the ground. For that plant to be recovered and for that curative application to work, then you need to look at asymptomatic turf. And that's not going to happen until the plant grows out of that infection, which the fungicides help. But maintaining that nitrogen inputs, those fertilizer apps, I think that's really important. And I've heard Brandon talk about this, where he goes back and he talks about the recommendations that were in place 50 years ago. We're back when they may have put 8 to 10 pounds of nitrogen on the turf. During that time, I could see that you have an unsustainable, lush, dense turf, very succulent tissue that's easy eating if you're a fungus like Rhizoctonia, and no one's doing that. I think being any that 3 to 4 pounds a year, I think you're going to have some great tall fescue, even if you're putting those down in half-pound increments, throughout those summer months.
We did have a question come in, Jesse, that you can certainly speak to, and it's about hybrid bermudagrass. And I don't know if it's golf green specific or not, but the question was about root rot on hybrid bermudagrass. And I would imagine that that's a take-all root rot question. Rather than a Pythium root rot question. Do you want to kind of shed some light on that?
Yep. And then the sad reality is it's likely both, because you find both in the same sample all the time. If we're talking putting greens, in any putting green sample, you can find evidence of Pythium. You can see the Pythium spores with the microscope. You're going to see that runner hyphae caused by the take-all patch organism, and you're going to have pathogenic nematodes. So it's very challenging to know which one's the primary culprit. Just going back to take-all root rot for a second, there was either a thesis project or a dissertation project at Mississippi State working with Dr. Maria Tomaso Peterson, who has done so much for this industry from a turf pathologist standpoint. She's outstanding. And they did aggressive sampling on these ultra dwarf bermudagrass putting greens, where they literally took little samples from probably 150 different locations on the same green. And what they found is, in some years, every single sample they took had not just at least one of the pathogens that causes take-all root rot, but now we know there's 4 different pathogens that cause it. So it's
Wow.
always present. And realistically, when your Bermuda grass is actively growing, you're likely dealing with some infection from either take-all root rot, Pythium root rot, or something like mini ring. And not to go off topic, but it's August 1st, which brings a smile to my face because one of the projects I've been working on for several years at Bayer, now Envu, was a product launch that we're actually having today. It's August 1st, is a product called Resilia, which is, to the best of my knowledge, the first fungicide slash nematicide that was exclusively developed to manage just that problem, which is root diseases. It has activity against fairy ring, patch diseases, which includes take-all root rot, Pythium root rot, and then also suppression of some of our really bad nematodes that we see in the Southeast, such as root knot nematodes and sting nematodes. But
Yep.
those applications should be made yesterday. Now is the time. We're going through the gauntlet of mini ring is active. Take-all root rot is going to be active very shortly. And then that takes us right into that spring dead spot season. So a lot of these applications on Bermuda grass, I get if you're spraying Daconil with, say, Signature or some type of contact fungicide, keep those on the leaf surface. Spray them on the surface, let them dry on the surface. But most other applications, take a good hard look and decide for yourself, do I want to water in this application? And take advantage of the fact that many of our fungicides are xylem systemic, meaning that if you do water them in an ideal world, they're going to get taken up by the roots and then they move up to the shoots. So a lot of times you're going to get foliar disease control if you water something in, but you won't necessarily get a root protection if you make a purely foliar application.
So I want to go back real quick here, Jesse. You talked about some of Maria's work with multiple fungi, pathogens that are kind of falling under the banner of take-all root rot. Are most of the AIs active on all of the things that fall under that banner, or do certain AIs touch, number 1 and 3, but miss 2 and 4? Like, how does that really work?
The latter. That's the frustrating thing. There's times when, forgive me, I don't know if this is work by Dr. Maria Tommaso Peterson, or if this is work from Jim Kearns' lab, but I've seen some of those results where you get excellent control if, say, you use a strobe on this particular pathogen, but not the other one, and vice versa when we're talking about some of the SDHIs and DMI chemistries, which brings up another point of being able to rotate some of your modes of action and have multiple things in there to cover a broader spectrum of pathogens, which is crazy because we talk about cover a broader spectrum of diseases, but in this case, we're talking about the spectrum of pathogens that cause that disease, which is not that different from what we see with Pythium root rot as well. Is, to my knowledge, there isn't just one Pythium fungicide that controls every single isolate of Pythium that causes root rot.
That's wild. I mean, and certainly something I know, you talked earlier about it's different now than it was in 2010, and nobody was really talking about this in 2010 in terms of root rot for these diseases of Bermuda grass and multiple pathogens causing it, but here we are. With your new product, Resilia, am I saying that right?
Yep, Resilia.
So is just so I understand it, to make extension recommendations in the future. So there's 2 AIs in there, and that provides greater coverage against that spectrum of root fungi that one might see in Bermuda grass.
Yeah, this one, there's actually 3 different actives in Resilia, spanning 3 different modes of action. And so, I mentioned that this product controls, fairy ring patch diseases, Pythium root rot, and pathogenic nematodes, you know, there's a lot of differences in the organisms I just mentioned. Patch diseases, that's something like take all root rot, summer patch, spring dead spot. Those are caused by ascomycete fungi. Something like mini ring and fairy ring, that's caused by basidiomycetes. Pythium root rot isn't caused by a fungus at all, and nematodes, heck, they're in the animal kingdom. So they're wildly different organisms. The frustrating thing is, what do they have in common? And what they have in common is they all affect the same plant part, which is the roots. So we really thought, in developing Resilia, that we knew we needed multiple AIs for what we wanted to ask this product to do. And so one of the active ingredients is prothioconazole. That is the DMI that's in the fungicide Densicor. And so what is that contributing to the spectrum of control? Well, Densicor or prothioconazole is a specialist on things like patch diseases and fairy. So we got that covered. Does not control Pythium. So for that, we use propamacarb, which is the active ingredient that's in Banol that people have been using and have trusted for more than 30 years in the space. So that controls Pythium. And then for nematode control, we included, essentially, when you apply Resilia at its single use rate of 4 fluid ounces, you're putting down the quarter high rate of indemnify. And so that's how we're getting that spectrum of control. And it's something, at least talking about nematodes just for a second, it's something guys have wanted, and they were already starting to do that, is put more consistent applications down for nematode control. And that's something they can now do legally on the label with Resilia.
That's really cool. I mean, and I'm, as you noted in the beginning, as a person who makes site visits largely focused on weed control issues, understanding things that can make desirable turf, be it bermudagrass or zoysia grass, healthier and more competitive against weeds is certainly relevant to me. So I'll ask you another follow-up. So I know in site visits made in 2023 by myself and other colleagues, I can think of one, in 2 weeks ago for mini ring reasons on a golf course. Densicor was brought up as a fungicide option for golf course fairways. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of viewed in a way that was favorable because it's a lower price point product. When one thinks about fungicide pricing, they think about greens pricing. And yes, then when you try to scale that out to 30 or 40 acres of fairways, yep, it gets hard to run the numbers. So yeah, with this new launch of yours, and maybe it's too soon to say, but is it going to be priced similar to Densicor or priced similar to what a greens fungicide would be?
So that's a good question. And moving forward, with say, I'll take it back to Banol. So a lot of people have used Banol for Pythium root rot on greens, and then if you take the cost of Banol, and when you put Resilia down, you're putting down essentially the standard rate of Banol, the 2 fluid ounce per 1,000 rate of Banol when you put down Resilia. I think a lot of guys are going to move to Resilia based on the price point. So Resilia, it is priced at $4.45 an acre. The kind of cool thing is, we have fall solutions, which is coming up, which is a big time for all the manufacturers out there, all of our distribution reps. And that's when a lot of superintendents make a lot of their decisions for next year. But there's also something called now solutions, where we have, spectacle herbicide for fall POA control at a reduced price. Resilia is on our now solution. So it costs roughly $445 an acre now, and then you're going to be able to take off $20 or so off that being in that program. You mentioned about prices of products. You could pretty much tell based on how something is priced whether or not it's a putting green material or a fairway material. And normally, if something is, depending on the rate, say under 200 an acre, that's going to be designed probably for fairway use. And then some other products that are, $300, $400, $500 an acre, those be used more on greens.
Yeah, and how does sports turf factor into this, Jesse? I mean, do you think with kind of how common some of these root pathogens are now for warm season grasses, were we in a world where these are going to have a fit in sports turf as well, and there's going to be a need for these pathogens to be controlled in sports turf, or is the footprint of, say, a singular rectangular field just so small that it's not really a relevant issue right now?
Yeah, just in terms of, is there a need for that? I think there is. That, sports turf, for whatever reason, it is one of those where it is hard to get registrations for products, and they definitely have them. You're an extension, so you live this a lot, and I get a lot of phone calls. The pool of chemistries available drops dramatically, whether we're talking sports turf and lawns. I do think there is a need for that. Develop to develop innovations to protect sports turf from root diseases, and that's true whether or not they overseed or with ryegrass or they don't. Uh, they need that protection. Some of the worst spring dead spot I've ever seen on a Bermuda surface was from a Bermuda grass athletic field. So they are definitely not immune from some of the same challenges that warm season turf experience in the Gulf space. They just have less resources as it pertains to products available to handle those challenges.
No, that makes sense. We've got another question that's come in going back to brown patch and tall fescue. Listener asks, should I bag clippings when I'm mowing my tall fescue yard and I'm dealing with brown patch? Says grow the fungus and bag it and remove it from the lawn. So would harvesting clippings and
Yep.
discarding those clippings from a yard help with brown patch management? I know what my answer is, but I'm going to let
Yeah.
you go first as the trained pathologist
Just
here.
do what I do is collect the clippings and sprinkle them in your neighbor's yard. That I'm I'm joking. If you're listening, I'm joking.
It's not an official
Yeah.
recommendation from
Yeah.
Envu.
It's not an official. That's just me having fun with this. Um, yeah, that is one of the sources of inoculum is, even if you put down a fungicide, you're not killing the fungus. You're simply kind of forcing that fungus in remission, so to speak. And those clippings are where a lot of that inoculum rests, especially if we're talking gray leaf spot. So I mentioned, gray leaf spot in tall fescue right now is absolutely a concern throughout Tennessee and the Carolinas, wherever there's tall fescue. Absolutely for something like gray leaf spot as well, which is one of those that, there's a lot of spores in those clippings. And a lot of these these survival structures, all they need is the environment to start to regrow itself. Removing those clippings helps. Same thing when I hear Ben McGraw talk about ABW control. Don't dump your collar or putting green clippings right next to the golf green. Take them off site, because that's where, in his world, the inoculum is just the ABW eggs and the ABWs themselves. In the disease world, same thing. If you can, bag them. Just remember, when you remove clippings, you're also losing a natural source of fertilizer, pretty much. So make sure that you're supplementing that deficit by adding a little bit of nitrogen when you do that.
Yeah, because that's what I was curious about, was that surely it would remove the inoculum, but is there a trade-off, and maybe too big of a trade-off, that the nitrogen from the clipping return for
Yeah.
recovery purposes being lost maybe makes the physical removal of the inoculum not worth it?
Yep. And then, you just think it through the logistics. What are you going to do with all those clippings? I guess for the homeowner, you could start some type of composting or whatever. But if you're a large lawn care operator, with those trucks, and you're principally, say, mowing yards, I don't know what you do with those clippings. You could load them into the back of the trailer, put a tarp on, but it's easier if you're dealing with a very small lawn. Like, I have a very small lawn myself. I could do something like that, but on some of these bigger lawns, bigger spaces, it's kind of easier said than done. Kind of like phrase mowing. It's a lovely idea, but what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, and your lawn might be the only lawn in America with its own Twitter account.
Yeah, I should bring that back. Dr. Brosnan's talking about, I think it was the @suburban yard, and I forgot my password, and then which is why that kind of lawn account has been sitting idle. I had it connected to some Canadian accounts. With that whole started, it did start that lawn, which is kind of funny. Is what happens if you just put the pedal to the metal and try to get the best lawn possible in the neighborhood. And I started it kind of right before COVID, and when I was living in Ontario, and then COVID hit, and I really didn't have much better things to do because we were locked down. You couldn't really leave your house. So it was when we were in the midst of that COVID pandemic where that lawn account got a little bit crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no new content, but for those of you who might not have seen it, highly recommend to go check it out. I mean, Jesse did a great job with, I think you had drone pictures, like overhead aerials of your yard, highlighting the straight line next.
Yeah, that was this year because I overseed my lawn with perennial ryegrass, something that it is August 1st. It is still hanging around. And at this point, I'm not going to do anything to intentionally get rid of it because I'll be seeding it again in a month from now.
Well, and it's interesting you say that. I mean, we're running out of time a little bit here, but we got enough to delve into this. I know plenty of places that tried to spray out their overseeded ryegrass this spring and did not fully succeed. Certainly canopy reduced, but was on a golf course last Monday, and you could clearly see where they had overseeded with ryegrass and where they did not. It becomes interesting if ryegrass overseeding is an every year endeavor. I mean, nobody has all the answers, and it's just fun to kind of get curious about, like, why are we spraying out the ryegrass anyway if it's going to naturally persist deep into the summer, and then we're going to replant ryegrass again in early.
Yep. And as you know, every season is definitely different. We actually had a spring this year, but it is really interesting. Think it's a lot of people overseed a lot of surfaces along the coast of the Carolinas, where their busy traffic season is October through, say, March or April, and it looks phenomenal. And then at some point, spring kind of segues into summer, and then all of a sudden let's get rid of the ryegrass because we want it to be just bermudagrass. Some of that I think is cosmetic, that we want it to be more uniform. We want it to be, just a monostand of bermudagrass or zoysia grass. But then again, you're going to be reseeding it in just a couple of months, and maybe take an area that's, say, not that much in play, and just see how you like it. See how it performs. I think there's pros and cons. Just using myself as an example in my own yard. Right now, I got a lot of gray leaf spot that's eating my ryegrass. Well, then the bermudagrass just kind of comes up and kind of fills that. So I at least have some cover. It works for what I'm doing, but see how it looks next summer. Take the section and see.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I was on a golf course site visit a couple weeks ago, and superintendent made a really, really interesting point. He said, for me, I need to do whatever maximizes the number of high quality playing condition days I can have in a year. So for him, that's overseeding with ryegrass every single year based on his location. And obviously they'll fall overseed, and they're going to keep that overseed as deep into the spring and early summer as they can. And he said to me, his plan moving forward is they're not going to spray it out. They're going to have some natural attrition during the summer, and there'll be an ebb and flow of what bermudagrass might be there and what might not be there given the environment. But if the objective is high quality playing conditions for the maximum number of days per year, and ryegrass overseeding is going to be the key to doing that for the shoulder seasons in this location, they didn't see a need to spray it out. And I thought that was a interesting way to kind of maybe look at things through a lens of playability in the customer more so than
Yeah.
cosmetically through the eye of a turfgrass manager.
Yeah. That um, I love that because that's coming. Did you say that was from a superintendent, Jim?
That
Was
was
that
from
a?
a golf course superintendent. That was
Yep.
that's his MO of how he makes decisions. And I remembered
Yeah.
that.
That's one of those where, because I look how many different platforms there are right now for superintendents to express their voice and have opportunities to present to their peers. I'd love to see, someone give a presentation on what he's seen by doing that, not spraying it out. What are some of the pros and cons that he sees, and why he's going to go a certain direction. And I think that'd be a fascinating topic. I think a lot of guys would be interested.
In my hope, Jesse, this is a little bit of a tangent, but as our industry, particularly the golf industry, has become more data heavy and interested in kind of performance metrics of how, say, a golf ball responds to a surface, I hope we can come to a place of using those tools to justify maybe agronomic decisions that are a little bit atypical than what we learned in school, right?
Yeah.
Because I can see a world where, well, if I can communicate to the golfers, the club leadership, the membership, wherever, that yes, it may look a little different in July because I didn't spray the ryegrass out, but the performance of the surface is the same from a ball reaction standpoint, and then layering kind of the resource use piece,
Mhm.
well, then that could help those decisions become more permanent part of what we do.
Absolutely. Yep.
We've got another question for you here. Any recommendations for best seed for a tall fescue lawn? And I'm imagining that is through a lens of brown patch management.
Yep. Uh, the best seed, in my mind, I'm gonna interpret this as a nice home lawn in suburbia. They want their tall fescue to look good. If it says Kentucky 31, that does have utility in some spaces, but if you want that nice high amenity landscape, you're going to have to pay more money for quality certified seed. And I give a lot of credit to a lot of our distributors out there. Some of those bigger companies, they every year they're taking a look at NTEPs and finding different combinations and making sure that they're providing certified seed to their customers. So that's number one. Make sure that it's certified seed. And then, for instance, for me, if as a turf pathologist, if I wanted a lot of brown patch, I would only use one cultivar. I would want a monostand. But that's not super sustainable. So I would look at a blend of at least two, preferably three different cultivars of tall fescue in there. And heck, even if it's a few percentages of Kentucky bluegrass in there as well.
Yeah, and I'll chime in and add that I would encourage you to use real human beings when you make these decisions. I recently learned about, I don't want to say it's a movement because it's too big of a phrase, but a colleague of mine gave a presentation and said that one of the things that was shared from an audience member at that presentation was that they used Chat GPT to determine what were the best grasses for their situation. And while novel and using technology to get to an answer, I'm not so sure that I want the robot making my turfgrass management decisions for me. So definitely a plug for using human beings. And if you're in Tennessee, we're lucky as a state that we have extension offices in all 95 counties and expertise in all 95 counties, people that are have training and education in this area, and they also know what they don't know. And if they can't get an answer to you, they can reach out to myself or one of my colleagues who's a specialist to get you the most cutting edge information that's out there. And on the variety piece and grass selection front, I know Dr. Sorokin, that's one thing his lab does quite a bit, is all of the variety testing of warm and cool season grasses here in Knoxville. So certainly in-state resources for those of you in Tennessee that might be listening to this. Jesse, what I'm going to do, because we're coming up on the end of our time, I'm going to put for our superintendent colleagues the information they need on the screen. So this is for golf course superintendents only. This is for their continuing education units. I'm going to say this very clearly. This has nothing to do with pesticide credits. There's no linkage to pesticide points or credits for any kind with what you see on the screen. This is only for our golf course superintendent friends that need to track their education through the GCSAA website. The event approval code for that is listed right here. And then you want to make sure that you list today's event date. Again, this has nothing to do with pesticide credits of any kind. If you are watching this as a recorded session on YouTube, where you can get these superintendent education points archived, you want to make sure that you note today's event date when you log that into the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America website. Well, Jesse, to quote a show we both grew up with on ESPN on I think it was Sunday mornings, do you have any parting shots?
I guess, well, one thing, thanks for having me. And I guess what I'd leave you with is, I know once we hit September, there's a lot of concerns: spring dead spot, large patch, fall, POA. But don't forget about what's here and now. There is a lot of diseases on these bent and Bermuda putting greens. Don't lose your sight on what's here and now. And good luck the rest of the way.
Yeah, I mean, in the weed science world, I'd argue our season's just starting, right?
Yep.
I think historically we think about, well, the season starts in spring with pre-crab apps, but I don't know that that's true anymore. I kind of think this is the time where it's post goosegrass cleanup, and I better have my ducks in a row POA wise going into the winter, because if I don't, the hurdles that are imposed by not having a thoughtful program in fall and early winter are super, super high and hard to pass. And one thing that my group here at UT has done, and I'll put this out there for anybody who wants to engage, if you want to sit down and talk about your POA program for the fall, we can certainly do that. I know, Jesse, you have resources at Envu that you can do that with folks too. I mean, I think you told me once that this is the most nuanced topic that you deal with in POA control.
It is,
right?
It's the most fascinating thing. I use the word intimate because every property is different. When I'm showing POA data slides, you almost need to set up each location. This is how this POA behaves at this property. This is some of the background on this specific population, because no one has the same POA. It's a fascinating and frustrating topic.
That's right. And that means it takes time, and it's not prescriptive. There's no one magic cocktail that's going to solve every single problem at every single location. And happy to help in any way that we can. But Jesse, I thank you for your time and joining us. Always good to have an alumnus back on Turf Tuesdays, and wish you the best the rest of the year.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Happy to do it. Had a lot of fun.
Awesome. We will see everybody in September. We're going to have what will probably be a more pleasant discussion than we originally thought. This was going to be a supply chain session, and by all accounts, things in the pesticide supply chain wise have improved. So we will have Jeff Marvin from PBI Gordon on to talk about supply chain issues in the pest management industry, and that will be in September. So until then, enjoy the rest of your day.